Yeah, I just stayed on 80 the whole way.
Oh, okay.
Then like, sitting this.
Yeah, there was construction or something.
Maybe that's what it was. It's all very little alert pop.
Yeah.
But a lot of farmers that are in the small ag market, right out.
Hi, Emily.
Oh, yeah.
Nice to meet you. Yeah, thanks for all of those. Yeah.
I think
Yeah, so that's nice to meet
Hi, can you hear me? Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, I can hear you too. I'm gonna come back.
Hey, yeah. Yeah, happy to be here. Yeah, it's quite a crowd.
Okay. It's official. Start. Okay, we're getting started right on time, which is a small miracle in and of itself. Welcome, thank you for being here. How are we doing online? Sam, I think you're our tester, but hopefully good. Folks, if you're joining us online, please use the Q&A for any technical needs or technical problems. We have a meeting owl in the room that is functioning as both a camera and a microphone. It's nice and loud, so when we move to public comment periods, we'll be able to hear you, but absolutely we want you to be able to hear us. So if we're running into any challenges there, please say the word over chat and I will do my best to support you. Okay, welcome. My name is Megan Wiley. I'm with California State University, Sacramento, the facilitator for the California Agricultural Land Equity Task Force. First, start us off. May we please acknowledge that California Native American tribes and tribal communities are the original stewards of the lands and waters of what we now call California. We thank you for that stewardship and will continue to work to recognize that past and raise tribal voices and knowledge through our work. Okay. And may I ask, Sean, would you like to give a quick welcome?
Great. Well, this is very exciting. Welcome. I'm so glad to have us all here together in this room. And thank you for joining us for this first meeting of the California Agricultural Land Equity Task Force. I'm Sean Kennedy with the Strategic Growth Council, SGC, and I currently serve as Program Lead for the task force. SGC's mission is to coordinate and work collaboratively with public agencies, communities, and stakeholders to achieve sustainability, economic prosperity, and the quality of life for all Californians. SGC's commitment to equity is the foundation on which this work takes place. In 2019, SGC adopted its first Racial Equity Action Plan, making it the first multi-agency state body in the United States to adopt a plan outlining concrete actions to achieve racial equity across all facets of our organization, from our leadership to our grant programs, policy initiatives, cross-sector collaborative work, and more. While this work is just getting started, the plan establishes an evolving framework for SGC to undo systemic and institutional injustices that prevent opportunity for all and to provide resources that support healthy, thriving, and resilient communities, particularly for the most at need Californians. In 2022, SGC was tasked with establishing the California Agricultural Land Equity Task Force, following years, if not decades, of work by advocates to equitably increase access to agricultural land across the state. SGC is honored to have been tasked with establishing and administering this body, and I look forward to working with and supporting you all through this work over the coming months. Thank you.
Thanks, Sean. Okay, because we're a formally convened body, let's please do a quick roll call to make sure we have quorum established. Sorry, we do have quorum established for your first meeting. Shall we go around the room? Start to my right. Dorian Payan. Here, let's see here.
Here.
Okay. Hold on, I have to see. When we elect a chair and a vice chair, this will be the chair and the vice chair's job. Okay, member Thea Rittenhouse. Here. Member Nelson Hawkins.
Here.
Good to meet you. Member Doria Robinson. Here. Member Lawrence Harlan.
Here.
Member Nathaniel Brown.
Here.
Member James Nakahara.
Present.
Member Ruth Dahlquist Willard.
Here.
Member Leah Schwartzman.
Here.
Member Irene Debara Ikuya.
Here.
I'll help me get that better next time. Member Emily Bermeo.
Here.
We have a quorum established. We can officially commence business today. Unfortunately, member Cheyenne Stone just became ill right before our meeting. So she had traveled up here. If she's feeling up to it, she's going to log into the meeting as soon as she can. So we'll keep an eye on that for her. And hopefully she'll be able to join us today. Okay. Oh, fantastic. Our interpreter has arrived, so we do have interpretation available. And if anyone would like interpretation, just let us know and we'll get you a headset. So thank you for that. So if you'll permit me a few minutes to run through some participation guidelines and housekeeping and all of that jazz, and then we'll get to it. First, please make sure you make yourself comfortable. We've got restrooms are located outside the store. Gentlemen's is straight through on the left. And then if you're women's or gender neutral, you take a left and then a right. It's a square, you can't really get lost. We have one break scheduled about halfway through. We go for 3 hours together today. But if you need to take a break beforehand at any time, please, you're welcome to do that. We have emergency exits where you came in, one out here and one out here. Okay, generally participation guidelines, we would like to follow these throughout the course of our time together, and this is applicable to anyone joining us here today. So task force members, support staff, members of the public, in person and online. So first, we recognize that everyone has put aside something else important to be here together today, and we thank you tremendously for that. And so please, let's try to be respectful of our shared time together. And that means being fully engaged and present for the time that we agreed to stay here together. So if you can, please limit side conversations. Please limit interaction with your technology, unless of course you're wanting to take meeting notes or something like that. If you do need to take a call or something along those lines, just go ahead and step out into the hallway. But please, thank you, and then make the space mutually respectful. If you need to turn your cell phones on silent, now is a good time. Also, in this meeting and all of our meetings, we respect diverse perspectives and we encourage inclusive participation. In fact, some of those deliberations are the most fun, right? So we want to listen, share, respect different viewpoints, and make sure that we're considerate of all the folks in the room by sharing the airspace with each other and making sure we're all working together to create that safe, respectful, and inclusive space for meaningful and productive conversation. And lastly, we're honoring time. I'm already sorry in advance that I'm talking so quickly, and I might have to apologize in advance for keeping us on schedule today. We've got a tight timeline. It's one of my most important jobs. So I might need to politely interrupt sometimes to keep us on track. We can help each other do that by staying on point on the agenda, current agenda topics. We do make space for public comments at the end of each agenda topic, and that would need to be specific to that agenda item. A general public comment period is at the end of our agenda today. So if a member of the public would like to make comments on any topic related to task force business that's not specifically agendized, that would be the time to do it. Public comment process. If you're in the room with us, happy to say we do have some folks in the room for, today with us. If you would like to make a comment on any of the agenda topics or during that general session at the end I just described, we've got some comment cards in the back of the room there. Please fill out the comment card to the best of your ability and then indicate which topic you would like to speak on. That helps us stay organized. And then we'll keep track of that. You can put your comment card on the little podium over there. And then during the appropriate time, we'll form a queue and let you know when it's time to come up there or up here and share your comment with the task force members. If you're joining us virtually, a very similar process for that, except there's a form for you to complete. Here's the website here, sgc.ca.gov/meetings. Please do a separate form for each of your items, so you can choose to give a comment on more than one item and or the general comment session. One form for each item. Listen for your name on Zoom when it's the appropriate time, and then everyone is muted upon entry. When it's time for you to engage in public comment, we'll unmute you from our ends, and then you'll be able to share your comment. We're estimating about 2 minutes per public comment today, and so I've got a timer if we need to use it, and we'll just kind of navigate that as we go along. This is a quick one on Zoom. I think I've said most of this, right? So muted upon entry, If you like, you can use your raised hands feature because it'll populate you to the top of the attendee list and you're easier to find. So I know where to unmute you and I can do that a little bit more quickly. And here's our plan for today. So we are, as soon as I'm done on my soapbox here, we're going to meet the task force. So we'll go around, have some introductions, and then a quick intro of the support staff here to support the task force. And it's our first inaugural meeting. So really today is about process and figuring out how we're all going to work together. So then we get to go through governance. So I previewed that with everyone. We will have Bagley Keene overview. Matt Reed is here to give us a quick overview of that. And then we'll spend a little time talking about charter and bylaws. Importantly, you'll nominate a chair and a vice chair. And then we will look at the work plan, scheduling over the course of the time together and briefing materials. Then we'll make space for general public comment before we close out. We close out at 5 p.m. We do need to be out of the room today at 5:30 because a class comes in after us. So we have more of a hard stop today than we might have in the future. Okay. Any questions on general participation guidelines or anything? Wonderful. Okay. So I'm very excited. Let's please spend some time saying hello to one another and meeting our task force members. If you can, give us your name, your affiliation, and if possible, in maybe 30 to 60 seconds, maybe share what inspired you to serve on this task force. I think that will be important to know. So, any volunteers to go first? I can go reverse alphabetical order. If we went reverse alphabetical order by first name. Yeah.
Hi, my name is Thea Rittenhouse. I'm the Farm Equity Advisor at the Department of Food and Agriculture. And what inspired me to join this task force, in addition to being named in the statute, is but besides that, that's been my work for the last 5 years, joining CDFA and serving. And really, understanding that land equity is really the most underlying important topic and issue that's facing Californians. And also I'm a farmer, so have certainly dealt with land equity issues in my time as a farmer as well. So that's 30 to 60 seconds.
Welcome. Thank you, Thea. Thanks. I'll take volunteers, and if I don't see anyone volunteering, I'll continue in reverse alphabetical order. Ruth R comes right before C.
Sure. I'm Ruth Swiller. I am an outgoing small farms advisor based in Fresno County with UC Cooperative Extension, or UC Agricultural and Natural Resources. And now I'm taking a role as the interim director of UC SARA, the Sustainable Agriculture Research and Education Program of A&R. And so I was inspired to join because of my experience in the San Joaquin Valley. Many of the farmers that my program supports are renting land, and just seeing all the ways that insecure land tenure impacts economic opportunity as well as opportunities for conservation practices.
Awesome. Thanks, Ruth. Nelson, you would be up next.
All right. Greetings, everybody. My name is Nelson Hawkins. I'm the founder of Legal Urban Farm right here in West Sacramento, right across the river. We provide access to our fruits and vegetables through our farm stand and our seasonal CSA. I also am the co-founder of the Drama Farmer Collective, serving as the agricultural project manager. And our mission is to secure long-term access to land and land tenure for historically underserved farmers of color, prioritizing Black farmers. And much of my work and inspiration to being a part of that is being as a farmer and facing the eventual development of my farm and making sure that the next generation has access to land.
Great.
And I'll follow that. My name is Daniel Brown. I started Brown and Sugar Farm. I grow flowers and peppers and maintain a few different orchards and help other farmers getting their produce to market and helping maintain their properties. I also am working on Ujama Farmer Collective, co-director and development manager there. So this task force is super important to me because as a landless farmer, all the questions come up and it seems like the best place to be talking about.
Thank you both. Leah, you're
Hi, I'm Leah Schwartzman. I'm the Senior Program Manager for the Equity and Conservation on Working Lands Program at California FarmLink. And I've been steeped in land access and land tenure issues for about 13 years and have really seen the challenges that farmer faces when they don't have secure land tenure specifically. And I've been very excited that folks are finally showing some attention to this issue. So I'm really excited to be in a room of other folks who are as passionate about this and want to jump into the kind of in the weeds solutions. We don't have one solution to this, we have many solutions to this. So I'm really excited to hear everybody else's ideas. So I've been testing many over the past several years, and I'd love to explore more opportunities.
Wonderful. I think there's many people that share your enthusiasm around this table. Lawrence.
Yes, my name is Lawrence Harlan. I'm a council member from the Fort Bilbo Indian community, also known as the Gaduda Cod Band of Northern Paiute, from Modoc County, northeastern California, right on the Oregon border, Oregon and Nevada border. So our ancestral territory spans kind of the northeastern part of California, but predominantly Oregon and Nevada is where we hail from. So land equity, I think it's about 200 years too late. So glad to be at this table. But better late than never. So like I said, I grew up in Modoc County. I grew up the next town over off the reservation. So I'm not a farmer. I grew up playing football and basketball and watching a lot of the non-natives, from settler backgrounds or doing farming land. So we could go on why I'm not a farmer, but I'm looking forward to getting some farm assets to the tribe. I'm also a delegate for our tribe to the Intertribal Buffalo Council, because you look at archaeological remains, there were buffalo in our part of the country. So thank you. I'm glad to be here.
Thank you, Lawrence. James.
Hey, everybody. It is really nice to be here and to see everybody in person. I work with Kitchen Table Advisors. We're a Bay Area-based organization that supports farmers and ranchers with the sustainability of their business advising, broader food systems change projects, and kind of cultivating relationships to some extent. Why am I here? I think land is one of the most powerful ways to ensure intergenerational wealth. It is a cultural resource of great significance, and I'm appreciative of the state's efforts to take that to heart and to convene this type of committee to try to navigate what is a very complicated and nuanced and rich area. So yeah, really looking forward to working with everybody.
Wonderful. Thanks for being here. Irene.
Hi, everyone. My name is Irene, and I'm Director of Policy and Communications with Líderes Campesinas. Líderes Campesinas translates to Women Farm Worker Leaders, and we're across the state of California. And so what inspires me, I think just coming obviously from a background that works and advocates for farm workers, that urgent need for access to resources, to land, equity. And before the pandemic, I think we were very much headed in that direction and more involved. And then that happened, right? And so a lot of our energy went there, so I'm very excited to engage and learn more.
Emily.
Aka, Emily Brigano, Mina Chibi, Matat Punanko Pai, the Pumisinako Punko Pai, and now Pipa, the Pumpia, McKinway. Hello, my name is Emily Brigano. I'm from the Ilponan village, also known as the Bay Nation of San Isabel, where I'm an annual citizen. I also come from the Sinalcatoon village, where my dad is from. And so I come from the Kumeyaay Nation, which is on the most southern part of California, and our homelands actually extend into Baja California, Mexico. So we surpass the borderline in every way. To share a little bit why I'm here is when I think of equity and land, I think of it as, you know, not just the people on the land, but the land within itself, how we interact with the land. In our language, mat means land, but it also means body because we were made in our creation story from the clay. So we are literally of the land, it's within our DNA. So thinking of the land as a relative has been a major philosophy in how we interact with the land and how we treat ourselves as well and one another. And so that's kind of why I'm here, is to give that perspective. And when it comes to agriculture, being inclusive of, you know, traditional practices and implementing those and making those accessible as well. And I was able to meet Sean this past year, it was, and Lynn at the Strategic Growth Council conference. And so that's kind of where I heard about this. And now I'm here today in this wonderful circle of people and look forward to sharing and learning from all of you as well.
Wonderful. Thanks for being here. Dorian. Hello, everybody. My name is Doria Robinson. Oh, sorry. There's another one.
Well, technically in reverse alphabetical, it would be Dorian.
Okay, right. I hear Dorian, I'm just like.
I know, I'll enunciate.
I love almost having a namesake, so that's yeah. Hi, everyone. I'm Dorian Bayan, and I'm with the Sustainable Economies Law Center. Before joining the organization, I was a full-time farmer, but after a couple of frustrating seasons, I really wanted to get to know the legal system that makes a relationship to land so difficult. And so I shifted gears into sort of a legal profession. In the state of California, you can become a lawyer without going to law school. So no debt. It's a great way. I call it punk rock lawyering, but I did it as a way to organize and to really get to understand the legal system better. Yeah, I'm really happy to be here. I was really resonating with Emily's words. You know, land is a social relationship. California especially has amassed a large amount of wealth through agriculture, but the social relationship that is related to that wealth does not reflect the world that I want to live in. And so I want to really move forward a vision that brings forward a social relationship where we can all be abundant in the wealth that California has offered us. So good to be here.
Thank you. Doria. Hi, I'm Doria Robinson. I am from the Ohlone Territory in the San Francisco Bay Area, Richmond, California, born and raised. I'm the executive director of Urban Tilt, it's an urban agriculture organization there. And I'm also a CDFA board member. First urban agriculture board member of the CDFA, first representative in that way. You know, people have said so many of my answers to why I'm here, just being passionate about the topic. I think that there's nothing that has changed our work in Richmond more than having ownership, for lack of a better word, but actual title to land in Richmond that we can care for in the way that our hearts call, you know? And not be on in a tenuous relationship where anyone at any time can tell us to go and move. We're able to have a kind of self-determination that you just can't get from a lease. And we're able to have a relationship with the land and responsibility to the land. So we actually can be of it that you can't get from a lease. I feel like it's really an essential thing that we need to make possible for many, many communities, many, many people. Also just in doing the work that we have been doing, more and more we're in contact with small farmers. And we see the struggle that small farmers go through because they're in that tenuous relationship of never knowing if they can invest or if they're gonna get pushed. And just feel like this is an essential conversation we have to have if we really believe in feeding people and making a sustainable, resilient business. So.
Thank you. So lovely to meet everyone in person. We don't yet have Cheyenne online, so we'll have to stop and say hello to Cheyenne when if she joins us. Thanks, Sean, for that. Okay, so the folks online are not seeing your calendar pop up, but it is frozen actually. Your screen's not advancing. No, wait, hold on one second.
This is no longer connected to that.
Oh, that's
This
the
is not
problem.
frozen, that is frozen.
Oh, that's frozen.
Yes, I've been getting rid of those, but it keeps going.
Okay,
Yeah, maybe try that.
we're still live on Zoom. We're just having a technical hiccup with the projector screen in the room here. Pardon us for 1 second. Our best laid plans here. Do you need to read next? Possibly. How did you? Okay, we're breaking it. How did you connect?
Yeah, let's try that.
Okay, sorry, folks, we're almost ready. But me Trevor.
It's that.
We're good. Okay.
We should remember to get that just in case I freeze again.
Yeah, technically.
Just so that you'll be fine. Yeah.
There's a 360
Oh,
camera.
everybody's talking, I don't know. This is good. Right, yeah. It changed.
Yeah. Okay, we're back, more or less. So here's our technical, so folks in the room, you're gonna just have to see our little Hollywood squares there at the top, and we'll try to address that during break. But most importantly, we're no longer frozen. So here we go. Sorry about that. Thank you. I hope that we all get to take some time to meet each other and dive a little deeper during breaks and maybe after at happy hour next door at the Mexican restaurant or something like this, if we've got time. But we really look forward to meeting you all and getting to know you all a little bit more over the course of our time together. You all have such a wealth of expertise and experience to bring to these discussions. Just as a kind of foundation setting, especially if you are a public member and this is your first time really tuning in and getting to understand the task force. The task force was convened to develop recommendations on how to equitably increase access to agricultural land for food production and traditional tribal agricultural uses. That's a direct extraction from the trailer bill language. You all have until January 1st, 2026 to develop a report of those recommendations that will be submitted to the legislature and governor. It include policy recommendations and similar. So I just kind of wanted to acknowledge, I had the fortunate opportunity to connect with all the task force members as we were preparing for our first meeting, as we were onboarding and leading up to the kickoff of this process. We're going to pull together some key themes from those discussions that we'll share out with you during meeting number 2. But what I really, really appreciated was everyone's interest in being visionary and being forward thinking and the real acknowledgement that this issue of land equity is much larger than any one perspective, and that the only way you're going to make substantive progress in the forward direction is thinking together and being together. So we're about to embark on this journey for about a little more than 2 years, and sometimes our conversations might be complicated and convoluted and nuanced and messy, and sometimes rather simple and straightforward. And that's all really great stuff. We're excited to see what your brainstorming process comes up with. And I just really want to acknowledge the diversity of perspectives and experience that you all bring to the table, because it's all very essential for this ultimate goal that you have here. So thank you. Okay, let's do a quick round of introductions on staff support. So we do have a team of folks that are here to support the task force. Sean, may we start with you?
Sure. Hi again, I'm Sean Kennedy. As I said, SGC Special Projects Analyst and currently serving as the program lead for the task force.
Lois.
Hi, everyone. I'm Lois Kim, Project Analyst at SGC. I primarily support our council meetings and our conference, but I'm here today.
Hi, Reed, and I'm the Strategic Growth Council Staff Council, and in that form, I advise our programs and our council members on the meeting plan plot, but also as well our programs in administration. So our programs administer college throughout California, and we provide legal services to our programs and activities.
Fabulous. To my left. Yeah.
Hi, everyone. I'm Camille Frazier. I'm a research analyst working in the collaboration and consensus program at State. So I'll be supporting research needs of the task force.
Sam, are you with us?
I am indeed. Let me start my video. Nope.
We hear you, which is a win.
Yeah, it looks like I can't start my video, but very nice to meet you all. I'm Sam McGill. I'm a senior facilitator with the Consensus and Collaboration Program at Sacramento State. I also serve as the tribal program coordinator and am involved in a number of efforts to conduct outreach to tribes throughout the state. Most recently, I helped design and facilitate the Department of Water Resources Tribal Water Summit back in April. Very excited about this topic. Megan already summed it up nicely, but there's a wealth of information and expertise in the room, and look forward to getting to know all of you. Thank you.
Thanks, Sam. And I'm Megan. Obviously, I'm a facilitator with CSUS Sacramento, and this is probably the most you'll hear from me in all of your meetings. What does a facilitator do? So I am working on behalf of you all as the task force, as an independent party, so independent from Strategic Growth Council, to help you all as a process guide and to kind of navigate your conversations as you seek to develop recommendations. But really, all of us here are working in support of you all. So the hope is that you tell us what you need and we get you what you need in order for you to have productive deliberations on the in-between. We also have both at SGC Strategic Growth Council and CSUS Sacramento State University. We throw out a lot of acronyms, so at any time you need a refresh, let me know. We also have a kind of a bench, to use a baseball analogy, World Series time, a bench of support if we need to pull some support in for any particular drafting of documents or things like that, or questions we might have. So we're here for you. Now you know faces, not just emails. You get a lot of emails from us. Okay, before we then turn to our next topic, so that's actually our first agenda topic. Close, do we have any public comments on this? On member intros? Okay, any comments, questions, reflections on this agenda topic from members of the task force? Okay, along the way, if I miss eye contact and I don't see your hand and you're like, hey, I want in the discussion queue, this is also very helpful. So I'll just keep an eye on that, and we can help each other out. Great, so next up, Matt Bagley Keene, Open Meeting Act requirements.
Thank you, Megan, and just take a point of privilege at the top to say how appreciative I am of everybody here and for being asked to and the seriousness with which this organization has been brought together. So really happy to be here and to be a resource to this council and staff as we embark on the mission. It's very important, and really hope to provide some assistance to you along the way. Not everything, oh, go ahead. Oh, sure. And not everything will be as dry as what I'm about to talk about. There are a lot of interesting issue areas in what you're encountering, but this is kind of the how. These are the rules governing how we do it. And so a little bit about me. My name is Matt Reed. I'm a lawyer, and I've been the strategic growth counsel for about just over 2 years. Actually, in past life, I was an intern with the Sustainable Economies Law Center back in the day, yeah, and really appreciate the work. But what we I bring in my background because what you do can only be done if you do it right under the law. So it's really important to have this kind of groundwork of rules. I promise they're not as complicated as I'm trying to demystify them a little bit. But I will jump to the next slide, please. Next slide, thank you, that was the intro. The application of the Bagley-Keene Open Meetings Act means that what you're doing is kind of of statewide importance. You've been asked by either an executive order or state law to engage on a question, a matter, or have some level of authority. So just want to kind of take the opportunity to say, congratulations. You are in a position of being regulated by state law with regards to your actions are so important that how you make them and how you make these determinations is something we have to abide by state procedural law to do it. So I just want to, it is important, even if it is at times dry. So this is all to say that public agencies are here to serve the citizens. The public government, our state government is here to do the people's work. Two main statutes that I deal with are Bagley-Keene and our Public Records Act requirements. Many of your actions in regard to this council will be governed by Public Records Act. If you have questions about that, feel free to reach out to the facilitators who's reviewing. They can provide you some advice on that. But it means that what we're doing is something, it's the public's business. So Bagley-Keene is predicated on the idea that agency actions or governmental actions must be open and accessible, and the public must be informed and involved in agency decision making. Go to the next slide, please. Megan's overview of the kind of statutory direction of the task force laid the groundwork. So this is a state board or commission or similar multi-member body created by statute or executive order. In this case, it's the budget bill to engage on the activities of the task force. So that means Bagley-Keene applies. Next slide. Now, what does the act govern? I think of it as the administration and conduct of meeting of a state body. How it governs it can sometimes be a little bit confusing. Is it governing conduct, or is it saying how a meeting has to happen? To be honest, it's a little bit of both. Next slide. The first kind of question that we encounter when we look at Bagley-Keene compliance is, what is a meeting? So if the Bagley-Keene Open Meetings Act regulates meetings, what's a meeting? And it's a majority of the body meeting to hear, discuss, or deliberate on any item within their subject matter. So again, subject matter is a key element of this. So going back to that, Megan's overview of what the activities of the task force are, those are some of the things that you talked about in your experience and your background with regard to why you're at this table, why you're interested in the topic. But it must relate to the subject matter. So if 8 of you are in Dungeons and Dragons active game, that's not going to be a meeting for purposes of this law. That is your outside activity, Dungeons and Dragons. If you're not talking about what's regulated by this act. So the elements are, we talk in law about the elements a lot. Majority of the body in a meeting, a congregation of sorts, we discuss or deliberate an item within the body, within these state body subject matter. And the act, so here's the functional prohibition here. The act prohibits a majority body meeting those elements unless it is in a publicly noticed meeting. So all the kind of noticing agendas that were put up in advance of this meeting are how these meetings are required to be held. So if the majority does these 4 things without it, then it has been a meeting for purposes of state law and it's been held in violation of the act. That's kind of the functional prohibition. They want every meeting that's occurring to be happening, with the opportunity, notice to the public, so that the public have the opportunity to participate and be informed about the materials. Next slide, please. Now, it wouldn't always happen like that. It's really unlikely that a majority of this body or any would get together and like, hey, let's all get together and talk. What's probably more likely is what's called a serial meeting, and it could inadvertently arise where, a number of communications kind of build up to a meeting, and I'll get into more detail. So the act expressly prohibits serial meetings, and a serial meeting is a series of communication, each of which involves less than a majority. But when taken as a whole, a majority of the task force has been engaged and has weighed in. So if we go to the next slide, what we get into is some examples on this, because it's a little bit tricky to conceptualize, but hopefully this is one of the key elements I want to take away. So, and there will be time at the end for Q&A. If you have questions about it, happy to talk. But the example, the grant awards board, which I made up, has 7 members in an agenda item. There will be awarding grant funds to 10 out of 20 projects that submitted timely grant applications. So we have 7 members. Member A calls member B to talk about how great this one application is. Member B then calls member C. Member C calls member D. So what we have is 4 people didn't get into a room together, but there were a number of communications where 4 people did kind of get a sense of what the other members were thinking. So this is an example of what would be a serial meeting prohibited under law. This is the 4 individual conversations, or in this case, I guess 3 individual conversations between 4 people did give rise to an illegal meeting. So that's kind of the gist of what a serial meeting prohibition is. And that's a much more likely area where kind of inadvertent violations come up, particularly if maybe member D isn't entirely aware that member C has already talked to member B and B to A or something like that. But nevertheless, a violation could occur. And for the record, if these are calls, but if these are emails, then the Public Records Act comes in, and there is the potential that if these were emails, then it would be provable that this series of communications occurred, and thus something illegal happened. That's kind of the big bad example that we want to make sure everyone walks away from this conversation today clear about. We can't be having serial meetings. Some of the items on the agenda, even the introductions here, I really appreciate that. That's a best practice, because sometimes in an informal introduction scenario, everyone's kind of coming together and they're saying, hey, we're serving on this task force. What brought you here? And you talked about your background, your interests, and then you talk about what you want to do, and you want to talk about what that report's going to say. That's where we get into trouble. So I really appreciate agendizing those conversations here. Got a couple more examples, and I promise we are almost getting close to done. We'll move on to Q&A. Example 2. So then staff communicates individually with each board member here of the grant awards panel in advance of a regularly noticed and agendized meeting. So any guesses on whether or not this is permissible? So yeah, it is permissible for staff members to communicate and to bring, the materials, to explain materials, maybe some of the public feedback or, what's going on with this individual item. What staff members can't do is end up being put in a position where they're being asked, what did these other members say? What's the will of the task force on this? They could inadvertently be a conduit for a serial meeting to occur, and that's problematic. Puts them in a tough spot. So those conversations between staff and members of the task force need to center on what you need as a member, the information that you'd like to receive, and less on other people's opinions, other thoughts, where the votes on this would be. That's the kind of question that you can't really, you might be able to ask it, but certainly no one could answer. Next slide, please. Example 3, so the chair of the 5-member grant award board directs 2 members to attend a site visit and report back to the full meeting. I'm gonna cover this is kind of a cheating slide, so I'm hiding the ball. I didn't really cover this in the previous materials. This is okay. The chair can direct either the formation of formal subcommittees. This would be an advisory, that'd be an advisory committee for purposes of badger team under this body. But what this is actually even smaller. It's a 2-member kind of like assignment. Go out, maybe go visit this, go to this meeting, and report back to the larger body. If it's not 3 people, particularly the 5-member grant awards panel would be a problem because we have a majority talking about potentially an issue before the board. But state law kind of recognizes a distinction between having a 2-person body and a 3-person, which looks more like a subcommittee. The subcommittee is formed and it needs to abide by the team as an advisory body. If it's 2 people, it's much more of a, they can go out and particularly where they're reporting back to the larger body. It's a very helpful way to get your work done too. So if that's something that you want to explore more, or if it's the middle of this task force, happy to structure that. Next slide, please. Let's talk about what is specifically mentioned as not being a meeting. So gatherings. This is where we go back, we go to the elements. It's meeting to discuss, material that's the subject matter of the task force. If you're a purely social gathering and you look around and you notice that there is potentially a quorum of the rest of the task force, well, that sounds like a really cool party because the right people are there. It doesn't necessarily mean that you are in a violation of the law just by virtue of being in the room. Clearly, if you notice that there are more people around from the body, take care of what you say and notice it. Be aware of that fact, but it does not necessarily mean that you can't be in a room or in a social gathering with other folks. Any number of bodies could not function if that was the rule. So conferences that are open to the public, so long as there's not this has come up in state law, a panel where a majority of the actual task force is sitting on a panel discussing matters before it. Unless it's structured as a meeting, you publicly notice that's inappropriate. But you can attend a conference, you're receiving that information. But if you're discussing it in a way that a majority of the body is going to hear it and kind of know, and they're discussing back and forth, that could be a illegal meeting. Third example, open and publicized meetings organized by an individual or organization to discuss topics of state concern. I don't really get why that's not covered by the top one, or these number 2 and 3 are pretty much the same. So I'm gonna skip these, but these are like listed out in law. So I just list them all. Open and notice meetings of another state body or local agency. You can attend, a CDFA board meeting. But what I will say, the best practice comes up in the next one. Open and notice meetings of the standing committee, provided that non-committee board members attend only as observers. For these 2, if members of this task force were to attend another state body, I'd encourage you not to, go up and make public comment. In that it's explicitly prohibited. Members, if the subcommittee is formed here, other members could attend and listen, but you may not participate unless you are on the subcommittee itself. It's called the church mouse rule. Quiet as a church mouse. Just silence if you attend a subcommittee that you're not assigned to of this body. And honestly, if we get into that situation, I'd love to, kind of have a refresher, talk to folks about best practices and everything like that. But there are opportunities for this group to work through subcommittees in really effective ways that also preserve the intent of the law and make sure that everything you do is above board. Next slide, please. I'm going to really skip through a lot of these basic requirements and procedures. A lot of the administrative team will handle this, and you have these materials in your packet. And if you have any questions about finance or anything, reach out. But a lot kind of has to happen to make sure that the public is aware, and the act is very, very specific about what happens when and what kind of notice it provides. So it's a lot to call a meeting. And more requirements, we'll skip this page, if we can go to the next slide. And then skip this one. Okay, so there are some changes in law for 2024. I'm not gonna go over them, in this meeting. I think that when this task force has the opportunity to go through charter bylaws and discuss kind of how you want to do the work that you want to do, some of these might become relevant, but at this point, it's kind of just confusing, because it just changes a lot of different requirements with regard to how teleconference meetings are conducted. So we'll skip and go on to the next slide here. Again, these are more requirements. I usually present this primarily to administrative staff, so these are more requirements that kind of fall on the administration of these meetings. So if we want to go to the next slide. So one piece I will notice on agendizing and some of these requirements that bears on you as members. Agendas need to be posted 10 days before. There are certain requirements about how information is distributed and when. So agendizing a late item creates challenges. So requests for, 3 days before a meeting, hey, I really want to hear this, have this discussion at the task force meeting. That puts staff in a really difficult place, and it's difficult to do so in a way that's compliant with the law. Possible, but it has to fit into a certain number of boxes. So a lot of the planning that goes into this meeting is really important to make sure that the administration occurs in a way that is compliant with the law. Hope that's clear, but I think it's relevant to what members of this task force will call and kind of what questions and be paying attention to the timeline of the administration of the task force. Right. Next slide, please. Agenda setting tips. We'll keep. Okay, actually, if we go to the next slide. So documents at or after a meeting, what is distributed to you will always be a public record. And a little bit of brief treatment. I'm happy to do individual consultations or support for folks and provide some training on Public Records Act compliance, but the work of this committee is going to be done via public record. There are very few potential confidentiality exceptions. If you're working through email, just know that that's potentially something that someone could request and receive, either a reporter, friend, or not friend. So just being aware of that and know that your presence on this committee, on this task force, does come with its disclosure requirements and the application of public records. So next slide. I do not like ending on this note, but there are penalties, there are remedies for this, and it is something that does get the attention of law enforcement at times, but it's not something that I expect this task force to have to deal with. But it's violations are serious, and they are they're taken very seriously. So that kind of concludes my presentation. I would love if that slide's not up while
Let's go back to the.
yeah, let's go. Slide. Thank you. So yeah, happy to provide if anyone has any questions, but I'm also always available. Matt, I think my email address is available to you all, but happy to be here.
Thank you, Matt. Any questions, points of clarification on Bagley Keen from Matt?
We're doing their own emails for this, or we're using our personal emails. Is there any communication?
I don't know what the status of whether or not you'll be provided the email.
Yeah, I think the intent is that you would just use your personal email, but if you wanted a separate email for this, then I'm happy to talk about that.
What else?
Are there any rules for when less than a majority meets and talks about the meeting topics?
So is the act speaks to, what is a meeting, and if a majority, meets and discusses the topic that's within the subject matter, it becomes a meeting. Less than, there is flexibility. And it happens. If anyone follows politics, that sometimes there are groups, voting blocks within city councils, county board of supervisors, those things exist. There, at this point, there aren't, and I couldn't tell you offhand if the charter bylaws govern this activity. The act prohibits what it prohibits, but it allows, potentially, groups smaller than the majority to meet and discuss. I think what can be difficult, and if through your deliberations, you decide to maybe put guidelines on communication, that go beyond precisely what the act requires, it would be because sometimes it's possible to have a serial meeting without knowing that this person's already talked to this person about it, and thus this email chain groups up with this email chain to create a serial meeting. But that's why many state bodies do choose to say, communication that occurs should be done, via email with staff CC or something like that. I don't believe that that's part of the package here, but it happens, but it's not something that the law requires.
But were you also talking about, Ruth, I was interpreting your question a little bit in a different direction. If a meeting is agendized and noticed, but less than a quorum shows up? I don't know if that was your intention, but just for a point of clarification. So if we go through the process of doing a meeting notice, posting the agenda 10 days in advance, sharing materials, but for some reason, less than a quorum of members is able to attend that day, you all, the attending members can decide to continue on with your conversations. You just can't take any formal action on those days because you have less than a quorum available for that activity. Other questions, comments?
I guess, well, I was just gonna say, a lot of this, may become clearer as we move along, and just to reiterate what Matt said, he's here as a resource for the duration of this work, and so as questions arise, please, get in touch.
Thank you very much all, for your attention, and very appreciate your service on this task force.
Thanks, Matt. Do we have any public comments on the topic of bag leaking, either in the room or online? No. Okay, we're all bag leaking professionals. Excellent.
Oh, sorry.
Oh, we did.
Oh, nice. Super quick question around it of like, from an advocacy perspective, if let's say I'm writing a letter of support for a thing, if I have multiple people from the task force just separate, right, sign on to that letter of support, is that okay?
Oh, okay. And I'll say typically public comment,
That's it.
wouldn't be, before, but I'll say it's relevant to the task force, and I really appreciate your question. And what you're describing is multiple members of the task force actually signing on to a letter. So that is a situation where that could create a serial meeting. If you have a majority and you circulate among the majority, and they're either aware of each other's signature, and they see that, oh, there's a majority on this letter, and they sign on, they know that that's their perspective, and presumably they're all on there because it's something to do with the work task force. So you could create a serial meeting in that regard. One piece is that maybe consideration of letters related to advocacy could come to the task force for approval or awareness or something like that. But you could inadvertently, I think, trigger a serial meeting through circulating that. I really appreciate your question because it raises kind of a common issue where if multiple members of the task force are receiving email, and this happens literally every day, and it will happen. Everyone's in the two box, and this says, hey, I think that you should adopt recommendation A. And one of you replies all, and says, I agree, and that's the way that I'll be voting. That is a serial meeting. Moving everyone to BCC is beautiful. And advocates, if we're removing the other members of the task force and responding to that individual alone, totally okay. That's fine. You can say that that's how I intend to vote. Conveying your position via email to a number of other members is, because you're responding to a group thread or something like that. That's a way that an inadvertent serial meeting could occur. And that's a really likely, that pattern comes up. So thank you for taking that.
It brought up another question too, so perhaps I'm not the one signing on, but my organization is, and I'm on the policy committee.
Mhm.
Are we in trouble?
More facts needed there. So, I mean, I think, maybe the general point that I'll make is, if you have questions, and if you receive something in your email, like, please flag it for us, do my best to respond timely. I know advocacy letters can sometimes be super tight turnarounds. But I would be aware that this is a place that this comes up a lot. It depends on who else is signing, how many others have signed, and how it was circulated. Even if it was circulated among everybody, only 4 people signed on, and you sign on, then potentially that fact pattern is almost certainly serial meeting that occurred with regard to the subject matter of that letter. If you're becoming aware of other perspectives on a matter that's before the task force, then it's, that's the kind of behavior that's regulated by the act. Yes.
And just to follow up on that, that only applies if the topic or subject matter is related to this group, right? So if it's on something different, it wouldn't be a serial meeting.
Mm-hmm. So knowing your statutory direction, what this task force is specifically assigned to do and what is outside of it is very important. And will help you navigate a lot of these questions. Some things will be close, but it won't be precisely on point. But it's really good to keep in mind what the statute says.
The follow-up questions?
Just one quick clarifying question. What constitutes a majority and what constitutes a quorum? Are those the same?
Great question. No, often they are the same. They're not always the same. The quorum is an administrative term that's just described like what's the minimum required number of attendees to conduct business. Often, and this task force I think will adopt the approach to it that's a majority. So all rectangles, all squares are rectangles, but not all rectangular squares thing. So it's quorum is a term of art, majority is
I have a follow-up question for you, Matt, and I just want to acknowledge separately in the Q&A, there's just acknowledge that we don't have Spanish language interpretation available on Zoom for this particular meeting. Our interpreter is functioning in the room. We do have the capacity at future meetings to do both. And that is really something that we're trying to organize in advance by request. And so we can offer that in multiple languages. So if any member of the public or a member of the task force would like interpretation either in the room or online, please reach out to us at any time and we'll make accommodations. But for today, we did not have that request for Zoom on Spanish. So we have an interpreter in the room with us today. So our apologies there. My follow-up question for you, Matt, was, shoot, I might have lost my train of thought here, but what was something that was useful for me when I was engaging in conversations with Matt about how are we going to structure engagement with the chair and the vice chair. So when we get to that time in your agenda where we'll consider our chair and vice chair and we'll have those elections, the chair and the vice chair can work and will work directly with your support staff here to develop the agendas for the different meetings. And so we'll be on correspondence together as we're having, we're doing those meeting planning activities. The chair and the vice chair will also hear from you all on specific agenda topics. So if something comes up for you on the months on the in-between and you would like that agendized, the process would be for you to reach out to your chair and vice chair and say, I request to have this agenda topic on the next meeting or 2 meetings from now. And then they will bring that into the planning session as we're developing the agenda with you all. And that is correct. That does not constitute a violation of bag leaking.
As long as it's, to that procedural point, the agenda is under discussion, and keeping staff apprised of those types of requests, and you think it's helpful.
Right. Okay. Anything else on bag leaking? Comes up along the way. We'll answer questions as best as we can. We'll call Matt. We'll have Matt on speed dial.
Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you. Thanks, Matt. Thanks, everyone. Great. So next up, close your eyes. I'm gonna speed through these slides that I fast forwarded. Don't want to make anyone motion sick. Okay. So we are about to embark on a conversation on governance documents. Very exciting, right? We have about an hour and 15 minutes total for this conversation. That includes a break around 3:30 or when it feels good for everyone. So we would like to talk about the charter, the draft charter, the draft bylaws, and make sure we save, I'm guessing 15 minutes or more at the end to elect a chair and vice chair for the task force. So that's our plan for this next session here. So charter up first. I'm actually going to stop my share for this screen, and I'm going to bring up the draft charter so that we can look at it in real time. Just as to note, these draft documents have been posted to the website. The website is, help me out, it's sgc.gov/meetings. I'm gonna get this correct before I mess it up. Oh, it's sgc.ca.gov/meetings/CALETF. That's your acronym for California Agricultural Land Equity Task Force. We can put that, I'll put that in the chat over break so that everyone online has quick access to that. But that is where we are going to maintain our online repository of materials throughout the duration of your process. So we will continue to email members a packet of materials, and we will print materials for anyone who requests printed packets, a task force member who requests a printed packets, and then use that online space for digital copies, and any member of the public can go access them at any time. So the slide deck, for example, that we're going through right now, real time, is posted to the website. And so are these draft governance documents that we're going to walk through. The other thing, since I'm on the topic of information sharing, if you're interested, if you're a member of the public and you're interested, we have a sign-up sheet on the back and you can leave your email. We are going to prepare an email listserv that might take us a couple of weeks to pull together, but if you want more regular updates and you don't need to, go check what's happening on our website, we're going to try to organize that soon. So we'll collect your email. Hopefully we can interpret your handwriting. If not, I'm going to call your friend, try to get the email address, because we want them all to go through to you. So sign up back there. And last thing, we are generating a meeting summary, and we'll do that for all of the meetings going forward. They are more high level, and they'll capture things like roll call, deliberations, key points of deliberations, motions, actions taken, and any follow-up action items that are assigned to your support staff, or if a member, task force member wants to take on an action item. So we will produce that, and they'll get shared within 3 weeks as draft, but they'll be considered draft until your subsequent meeting, when you'll have to basically approve the meeting minutes from the prior meeting. And those is kind of like more of a quick summary. You don't want to go back and watch the whole meeting. You also have that written record, and those will be posted to the project website as well. Okay, so charter bylaws. Everyone ready? The draft charter. So we prepared these for the task force for your consideration. I just want to emphasize the fact that they're draft, and all of this is subject to your editing, and we can open it up for as much or as little discussion today as we like, and or decide to call the question to adopt your charter and or bylaws. So we're gonna kind of test the waters and make some real-time decisions together on these pieces. I just don't want anyone to feel like this is, you know, if you haven't had enough time to really consider this, or we're engaging in conversation about components of the charter and or the bylaws, that this is your only opportunity to do that. So if it makes sense to continue this conversation to meeting number 2, we absolutely can. Sound good? I'm also prepared to do my best at some real-time on-screen tracked changes edits for both of these documents. If that's useful, if anyone has something to propose, maybe a typo, maybe it's an entire paragraph. So we'll see where we're at with that as well. So hopefully everyone had a chance to give these a quick look. I'm just going to do a fly through of the charter here. We're not going to read this line by line together, but just to give us some orientation. The charter is a little bit more high level, a tiny bit more approachable, less kind of in the weeds logistics than the bylaws. I think it talks about the background and the composition of the task force, how you were all appointed at a high level, hits on your objectives, which of course the primary one is the development of your recommendations. But the ideas here are you're going to explore some of these critical concepts, review current research, engage in productive deliberations, etc. There are sections here that discuss roles and responsibilities of task force members, the chair and the vice chair, administration, which is the role of Strategic Growth Council, facilitation support, which is the role of CSUS, and a technical advisory committee, which is not convened yet, but can be convened on an ad hoc basis. And I think that will be more important when we get to the point of developing recommendations, and we have draft recommendations to get their feedback on. It also discusses operating protocols, where we talk about we'll be operating in accordance with Bagley-Keene. Meeting notes, what I just described, as a matter of fact, and supplementary materials being shared out and posted to the website prior to each meeting. And then an outline of principles of collaboration, which kind of mirrors, but goes in a little bit more detail of just the general guiding principles that we talked through at the beginning of today's meeting. So you can take some time to review those. And then standard meeting ground rules, which are, electronic courtesy, make yourself comfortable, treat each other respectfully, very similar things that we discussed. This one's great, consensus seeking decision-making model. We are hoping that when we move to the point of developing recommendations, we've got most people or everyone, if we can, on board with the recommendations, and we're going to be seeking consensus support. But if we can't, that's okay too. We can always capture divergent perspectives or different options or ideas within your draft report, or excuse me, your final report to the legislature as well. I just want to point out, we're consensus seeking. And then a schedule and a work plan, that's not captured here. It says it's developed as a separate document and will be updated along the way. And I've got a slide for that too. So let me pause. That was the charter. I'm going to scroll back to the top and open the floor. Does any task force member have questions, comments, suggested revisions on your charter?
I have one on the task force objectives. Are there any comments from the other task force members or just ideas for how to strengthen the connection with communities that are represented on the task force or other communities that might be reached out to? I think I would like to see something about going back to those communities and reporting back after the learning. One of the points is actively engage, include, and learn from communities, groups, and individuals affected by the land equity crisis. What about adding something about going and reporting back to them after the recommendations are made, or in draft form or something like that? are interested to hear others' thoughts as well and how to do that well.
Open floor.
I like that idea.
Yeah, I think a lot of times, there will be outreach to communities to help understand challenges and problems, and then things happen, and then there's like programs that get designed, but then a lot of times the people who helped explain why there's a need for that program don't hear about the program. And I think it's relatively easy from a logistics standpoint to make sure that we can follow up with the people that we're engaged with through this task force.
Does any task force member have any concerns about adding this particular language or concept into your charter? Okay, no concerns expressed. Doria, go ahead.
Not so much a concern, but I do wonder what the relationship of the charter is to the scope of work. I'm wondering if we need to also make sure that there's some kind of an action item that supports it. So we don't just say it in the charter, but then there's no actual action directive in what we're being directed to do.
That's a really good point. And in fact, we waffled with similar language, I think at one point, because of that very reason, we didn't want to project too far out into the future. I think that there would be a way to provide some soft language here where it's may or members are encouraged to, or something like this, connect with their communities, groups and individuals after recommendations have been developed. If folks are interested in including that.
Could I just come in?
Go ahead, yes, please, of course.
So I was just, thinking, and again, to kind of contextualize the charter here is, we start with the enabling legislation that we have, which is a couple of paragraphs essentially that say, who is on this body and in very general terms, what the body is to do. The charter is a first attempt to add some flavor to that and sort of, what are some of the subject areas we might want to think about? What are some of the ways that we might want to start thinking about operationalizing what's contained in that legislation? But then it is that work plan that's mentioned at the end of this document is where that is ultimately operationalized. And I think your suggestion, Doria, from my understanding, is that we need, in developing that work plan, clear mechanisms in place to ensure that we are ensuring that every sort of the aspirations that we've highlighted in general terms in the charter are actually being seen through. So happy to take that on.
Yeah. I think but my fear is that at some point we're told that we were only supposed to get to the report, and after the report, thank you, bye. Right. And so I was like,
And the timeline for it too, right? Takes time to outreach.
It does. Okay. So where are we landing on this one? Soft language included in the charter, general acknowledgement that this is something that many of you at least, are likely interested to do after you develop your recommendations. Possibly building it into an extended work plan. I don't know. We'll take direction from you all, of course.
Can I suggest, I think it would be really good if we actually hear if there's anyone who really doesn't think this is a good idea. So we can understand if there's a blocking concern in the room. And before we kind of like assume we move forward. And then maybe somebody can actually like make a formal kind of proposal addition. In your own language, maybe it's you put it forward, like what is it that you really meant?
Would any task force member like to issue a concern with including language like this? Not hearing any concerns?
Kind of a question about it. After gleaning the community's needs and concerns, including those into recommendations, I guess my only concern is what if those recommendations are not adopted and we've kind of gotten people's hopes up for something that ultimately doesn't come to fruition. I wonder if the outreach is actually part of the recommendation as part of it, if adopted, to have a more complete and robust outreach plan to the communities. Or at least incorporating like that caveat when we outreach to the communities that like, these are the recommendations we put forward so that you can support their adoption.
I think that's.
Yeah, is that it? Yeah, like we need you to get behind this. Yeah,
And what are the next steps
yeah,
now that these recommendations have been made, sort of a follow-up plan?
for advocacy to get them to happen, yeah.
I think that makes a lot of sense because it's not like we'll have solutions, like all you have to do is this. It's like, these are what we made, these are recommendations and like how they can support that as objectives seems like. Yeah. There's some, whether it's a survey, whether it's a, listening.
So I'm going to pull from the charter, hold on to this, in terms of kind of a follow plan for advocacy.
Can I ask, I'm sorry, can I ask whether it's part of the concern, or maybe what could be adjusted here is not necessarily after recommendations are developed as like the key framework, but that actually there should be kind of a continual pathway between communities and task force, so there's some amount of reporting back about the work of the task force. What's happening like throughout the life of the task force, maybe that would alleviate some of the thoughts about like result oriented online. Thing to consider.
I think actively engage kind of covers that. Maybe you can add a word about in an ongoing way or throughout the life of the task force or something. Add to the end of that sentence. Yeah. So that it's not just a one-time thing.
Okay, so if we modified bullet 4 to read actively engage, I'm not the best at wordsmithing on the fly, so everyone help me make this, improve this. But actively engage, include and learn from communities, groups and individuals affected by the land equity crisis throughout the duration of the task force.
I would still like to add the other. Language. Can I put a suggestion forward since, maybe something like, you know, share recommendations with communities involved in the process with, suggestions for next steps or follow-up or something like that.
Yeah.
Or with options for follow-up. I don't know if we want to necessarily tell people exactly what we'd like to do with information. Maybe it's up to them, but share the range of things that could help with implementing recommendations.
Is it good? Sorry, learning the rules of engagement, but, I wonder so this language here throughout the duration of the task force, but it seems like you're almost talking beyond the duration of the task force, is what we also need to consider.
I'd say it's at the very end, like a final step of the task force work should be to go back to the communities and inform them of how they influence the process and how their information was used, so that it's not just extracting their recommendations, but it's, you know, letting them know what the results were.
Right, okay.
Something like, so that at the very end, but not after the task force is done. But like and it often it's hard to work out into the timeline as was kind of referenced earlier. But I think if it's not specifically called out, it's more of a risk that it doesn't happen at all. And just from my own experience, I've been part of a lot of, groups from outside the San Joaquin Valley come in wanting to collect information from people there with very good intentions, but it's always just more work to come back and say, here's what we did with your information. And then those communities feel like these people came into the focus group and I never found out what happened as a result of that. And so they're gonna be less likely to come to the next focus group, but we just want to avoid that kind of situation.
So almost like an additional round of review, or like the preliminary recommendations that the group has go back to those folks before they become the final recommendation, so there's still a chance to.
I think that if we have time for that, that would be excellent thing to do. I'm not sure exactly what the timeline is gonna be in the kind of home stretch.
Yes.
But I would say at the minimum would be to inform the communities of how their information is used.
Okay.
Sharing draft recommendations for comment would I think also be a really good thing to do. Maybe we could have May for that, that's off the language. Just in case we're too pressed for time. But I think a requirement should be to share back.
So I think that piece at the discretion of the task force, can be built into the work plan. So this is just kind of a high level snapshot of the objectives, just to kind of, guide you all along the way. So I feel like this kind of captures it if we draw that distinction between actual on the ground activities and the concept of the fact that you all have a strong desire to be engaged with your communities and do that back and forth outreach. So can we try this one on for size? And also, if we're not feeling 100% solid on this language, we can sit on this and then we can bring it back into meeting number 2. And then we can decide to adopt as revised if you like, because it is very challenging to finesse language on the fly, right? So actively engage, include, and learn from communities, groups, and individuals affected by the land equity crisis throughout the duration of the task force or task or something. That sentence to me feels a bit incomplete. I'm not sure why. But then upon final adoption of recommendations, share recommendations with communities involved in the process with options for follow-up and or next steps. I think my opinion is that the concepts are there, but it could use a little finessing. So maybe we table this, and if we have time, we can come back to it or possibly think of something over break. Go ahead.
I'm in agreement with the language, at least the kind of draft and work phone. One concern I have, and maybe point of clarification, is like who has the power to really implement the policies? Because to my knowledge, it's like the governor is going to sign off on it or veto it. So at that point, after we put in these recommendations, what can we do for the public to actually influence those policy implementations?
That's a good question. I think that one is actually beyond the scope of this particular timeline, but that doesn't mean it is not of essential importance. And it might be something that you all can think about as we get closer to 2026. Sean, did you want to say anything more about that?
Well, I think it's a really important point. I think the key thing to consider, and this also ties back to the technical advisory committee that we're hoping to assemble, is to be able to provide guidance to you on how to, again, back to operationalizing what it is that you're hoping to achieve and laying out what those potential pathways are. If you want to get this thing implemented, here's a potential channel you can explore, and then here's all the steps along the way that you need to address to get that sort of thing to happen to then, to the extent possible, increase the likelihood that what you're proposing actually moves forward. So again, none of that can be guaranteed, but providing you the support that we can to at least lay out on the table of what's possible. Does that answer your question?
Yeah.
Okay. So I'm gonna delete this. We're working on this. Other important concepts that we should include in the charter and the objectives and any other section, anything else on your mind related to the charter?
maybe some clarification on the composition. How important is that if it's already composed? And is that written in the law? Do we need to spend time on that, like just defining like the native and tribal liaisons?
So that is
Because like what are liaisons to what?
So that's the language from the legislation.
Okay, so there's no change on that.
So we can't change the language is, but I would acknowledge that a term such as liaison could be certainly up for like need for further definition or clarity around what that actually entails in. But yeah, here it's the sort of broader framework that we're in. Like the legislation established a body comprised like this, and we have to stick within those parameters that are set, but we can't sort of go beyond those, but we can certainly refine and things as needed.
And just for my clarification, what is that? Like, what's the definition of that? Is it federally recognized tribes?
There isn't. So this is just the language as pulled from it's literally only two very, very short paragraphs that, and so again, that's something for this group to decide that use.
Yeah, do we have any ability to modify this language if it's a direct extraction from the bill language?
It's not necessarily modifying the language, but we can provide clarity or definitions as to what that actually means as this group understands.
Could it be almost footnoted from there? Like, could you have a footnote at liaisons and then we could craft some kind of acknowledgement?
Yeah.
What is that?
I guess like what would, we know who these members are and then define how we fit this bullet.
So is your question too, I guess, who are the native and tribal liaisons on this body?
Yes, yeah. And then what, I guess the question is because I think it's worth noting because there's different, that could be open to non-federally recognized tribes in California, tribal member. It could be a federally recognized person that's not from a California tribe. So it could be, I don't know who they are and then what role they are on the task force.
Yeah, so on the task force, it is you and Emily and Shane.
Okay.
And part of the nomination process was, as it says down the bottom here, is for SGC to consult with the CDFA Farm Equity Advisor and bottom, you scroll down, California Truth and Healing Council on determining who those individuals should be. And so we went through that process from the initial nominations we received. And we have folks here, you're all sort of slotted into some of these different categories that we have. But so that was through consultation with them and the Governor's Office of Tribal Affairs to come to those, do those folks out.
Okay.
I think it's an important question too, because you'll even find non-tribal, tribal liaisons. So it's good to identify those, that you're using or that are identified as tribal or native liaisons on the task force here.
Yeah, I guess the question then becomes, would you like us from an administration point of view to put forward a more rigid definition of how we're interpreting that? I think the approach that I'm trying to take here is, and this is not the only instance that this will occur, but there are things like that this body is in a position to define in the way that you see appropriate for your work. So that's not me trying to be evasive, it's more, this is your group, we're here to provide support, not necessarily tell you what to do. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, it's up to the task force.
Yeah.
Okay.
And so if you want to propose either in this document as we develop.
I guess I just want to be clear, like to the public and to somebody who's, maybe there's a Native American who's not on the task force and they feel they should be, like it kind of lays it out, but what role, I know my role, I guess, would be a liaison to my tribal community and to the broader tribal community as well. and to the public, so there's different hats to fill.
Yeah.
And the other purpose of kind of listing the composition here is that if there's some type of unfortunate occurrence and somebody has to step down from the task force, then we know what kind of representative that we need to fill it, with, you know, land trust or financial or something like that, so that we're making sure the appropriate perspectives are included in the conversation.
Okay, yeah. And it kind of relates to, I noticed there's another bullet on section 3. Consult with California Native American tribal members. And just interested on what's the task force intention with that, like what, because that could, when I see California Native American tribal members, I'm thinking members of tribes that are either federally not recognized from the state of California. There are Aboriginal territory is in the state of California. But then there's also a large population of Native Americans that are from outside the state who also have great insight and feedback. So I guess the task force didn't write this. So I guess maybe Sean, like what was the intention? And then the task force could address that as well.
Yeah, well, again, and I'm not trying to be evasive with any of this, but it is, that is also up for interpretation. And I think as we see these pieces building, as I said before, we're established with a couple of paragraphs at the end of the budget bill last year. We've taken, based on the conversations that Megan has had with each of you, to try to understand a bit more how you see that language and what that was intended to achieve and how. This charter has been our best attempt at capturing that. But what we need, I really think, is the development of the work plan, which is step one for how we start with all of these terms that we have in here. What do we actually mean by this? How is equity defined? How is, so that we can then move forward there and have specific actions in place to advance these things. But things like outreach, what sort of outreach are we talking about? With whom, when, under what conditions? All of that, I think, finds further attention in the work plan, which will develop subsequent to this.
So I would say, if it were up to me, I would recommend it be consultation, because it's the Aboriginal territory for the most part of consult with enrolled tribal members of California's federally recognized tribes. And I'm not familiar with the non-federally recognized. So with respect, I would ask for some help on that, but I definitely think it should be, we should talk about California's tribes versus Native Americans who happen to reside in the state of California from other parts of the nation.
In fact, I can, I'd like to just put forward.
Yeah, Joanne and James.
Yeah, sorry. I just forward that not to include the federally recognized part, because in the Bay Area, the Ohlone folks are not federally recognized. That is the biggest land area, group of people, and they would be totally excluded.
Okay.
And I feel like they have a lot to add to the conversation, and there's some really important work that support the land trust and other folks are doing.
Yeah.
That I feel like they should really be included in.
Yeah, I respect that. I respect that. But I also, I don't want to ignore the tribes who have existing tribal governments for many years, many decades. I don't want to ignore their input as well, because they're not in the Bay Area, and they are in more remote areas of the state, but they've had federal, they've had governments for many years, but I don't know how I definitely want to include, the Ohlone and other non-federally recognized tribes, but I don't know, other than just writing it down, like, what would a suggestion?
I think, isn't it the California Heritage, There's one more from that acronym that I just made. Commission, right? Yeah, they have a list of federally and non-federally California tribes. So that, I would defer to that list.
Yeah, that would define who we're gonna work with.
And the Loniara.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Janice, then Ruth, and then I think that's the commission.
I was
Perhaps nine.
I was gonna bring up the exact same point, that Dory made about, inclusion of non-federally recognized tribes, and that actually makes me kind of like the original language a little bit, but it sounds like there's a list that exists somewhere of both the federally and non-federally recognized tribes in California, and my understanding too is that partially like, this is explicitly broadly stated in the charter, and then when we move to work plans and figuring out how that consultation looks in detail, we can have a more in-depth discussion about that element of this part of the charter. I'm asking that last part for clarity. That's.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and just to clarify too, so California Native American tribes does include federally and non-federally recognized tribes in California.
Right.
So that is the language that the government uses to refer to both federally recognized and non-federally recognized California Native American tribes. So that's why we had listed it that way, but this conversation is really helpful because it points to the challenges in language, right? Making sure everyone's included.
So the language California Native American tribal members.
Or we could say tribes.
Is defined.
Tribal
It is
nations,
defined.
yeah.
Tribal nations is better for that, okay,
I would, yeah, they are tribe, sovereign tribal nations.
okay, that's helpful. So this.
And I have a question.
Emily, then Ruth, sorry.
And this section is valid for all task members, or is it just for the tribal liaisons?
I can tell you what my interpretation of it is. We were putting these together as kind of a global guidance, and we were discussing maybe options for tribal listening sessions or subcommittees, or how was Matt describing it, like kind of updates or something like this in the meeting. So maybe there's a specific topic that you all are exploring, and then you can ask or delegate certain task force members to say, can you please go have these conversations with these tribes or these community groups or these organizations, and then report back or invite them to public comments or things like that. So I don't think that any particular objective is directed at a specific representative. I think it's more universal, and I think it's kind of a share of the responsibility. Ruth, did you want back in?
Just to follow up on, I agree with Terry and James' point, and one of the groups in the San Joaquin Valley that's not federally recognized is the Wapchungi tribe. And they are definitely involved in land access and equity, so I want to make sure they're included.
Right. Okay. As a brief time check, we're almost at 3:45. Are there other items on the charter related to the charter for us to begin an exploratory conversation on now? I think I would like to propose, but someone please, if you would feel differently, say the word. I think I would like to propose circulating a copy of the charter in tracked changes to you all after this meeting, and that way you can sit with it one more time, and then we can finesse language and then consider adoption at the second meeting, unless everyone feels very happy with where we're at. But I get the sense that a little bit more time just to make sure we're happy with the language would be beneficial.
Yeah, I think so.
Okay. May we pause for about a 15-minute break, come back at the top of the hour, and then move into bylaws? Okay, great. Great time. We'll start right at the top of the hour, or maybe 1 minute before.
Oh, yeah.
Question my feeling of that was fine. Yeah.
That's what I call it.
Yeah. And take the. Yeah. Yeah, right.
I mean, that's part of
Yeah, kind of like.
Yeah, they have fun.
Yeah.
Yeah, no.
I just know that, yeah, I didn't know like.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. All right. All right.
Like I know. We thought it.
Yeah. We should, yeah.
I would say.
As I realized, oh, like,
Oh,
The good comment is like, why are we preparing? Ask members, but we were using the.
I thought it was like house brown and everything.
I don't think we are. Further down that way. Yeah.
Right, folks.
Yeah.
15 minutes go by just like that.
Yeah. I think I'm just like,
Yeah, we can right out.
I'm kind of like holding all.
One and done.
Is there anything-
In and out, but I'll be actually back the sixth. Oh, I'll be back next week. It'll be our final meeting for the intertribal with intertribal agriculture. Yeah. We will get fire on that. Yeah. It actually started earlier this year. We had different monthly or
Thanks, everyone. No, 15 minutes goes by quickly. We are, our microphones are back on, so just be advised. Okay, top of the hour, 4 o'clock. We have 1 hour left. Let's go through the same process with the bylaws. I'll do a high level fly through. We'll highlight sections that we need some discussion on and maybe do some track changes, edits, decide what we want to do with those guys. Okay, we're budgeting until 4:30 for the conversation on governance. I will probably try to break us around 4:15, if we're not done earlier, so that we have ample time to elect the chair and vice chair. So, without further ado, bylaws, here we go. Again, draft. Same idea as the charter. This is a little bit more procedural. So some of this is kind of legalese, if you will. I'm gonna do a quick fly through. Section on membership roles and responsibilities. A little bit of this overlaps with the charter. But this has some discussion on if a member chooses to vacate their position, how folks get reappointed, get appointed if a replacement is needed. Expectations, I'm just gonna point out number 5, that we would love for you to attend all meetings. We know sometimes things come up. If you have an expected absence or for some reason get scheduled on a date, you know you can't be there. We can understand that, but please try to let your chair and your vice chair and your support staff know. But if a member misses an excessive amount of meetings, then that'll come up for a discussion amongst your task force members here. You're considered state officials, as Matt mentioned. I know I did pop this link in an email to you all, but that means everyone's required to take this ethics training course. And that should be done within 6 months of your appointment. So if you all can do that by the end of the calendar year, that would be beneficial. And it says the training takes about an hour. So if you can budget time for that over the next 2 months, that would be great. We have a section here on election of officers and duties. And so this will come into play today when we elect a chair and a vice chair. And so you'll be, the chair and the vice chair will be elected from appointed members, you all, by 51% or more voting members present. And we would like the chair and the vice chair to serve for the duration of the task force, since it is a relatively short period of time. We would love to have that continuity. What does it mean to be a chair and a vice chair? Primarily, the chair will preside over meetings. That doesn't mean you need to take a strong, if you are elected chair, that you take a strong facilitation role. We'll call the meeting to order right at the start. Most of the engagement comes on the in-between with the support staff on agenda development, and then thinking through the arc of conversations and doing some work planning. And then bringing that back, and then, kind of sharing that back with your task force members. And so that means it's going to require a little bit of work on the in-between, just so you're aware. So a couple of planning calls, probably in between quarterly meetings. All of that would happen online over Zoom, unless we all happen to be in the same space at the same time. And then also importantly, as the chair and the vice chair, we provide leadership during the meetings and guidance to make sure that everyone is staying on point and engaged in the conversations. So that's really what it is. Just to re-emphasize, we're here to try to do much of the work for you all as we can, because we know that you have very important obligations elsewhere, and we want to support you as much as we can. So you don't have a lot of homework aside from that. As a chair and vice chair, also as a task force member. Okay, section on task force members, roles and responsibilities. Same kind of stuff that we just discussed. Everyone needs to be familiar with Bagley-Keene. Good thing we had a briefing on that. Here's the section on subcommittees. So Matt alluded to this as well. Throughout the course of your time together, as you're seeking to develop recommendations, you all can decide you want to build this up or to develop, I'm losing my words suddenly, that you all want to form, let's try that one, a subcommittee that serves on an ad hoc basis for a particular task. And that can be comprised of 2 or more members. If it is 3 or more members, then the subcommittee meetings will also be subject to Bagley-Keene requirements. So we'll post an agenda 10 days in advance, etc. Subcommittees are advisory. So the role of a subcommittee would be, say, you all are, a subcommittee is formed to go collect public input on subject matter A. Then you would come back and bring your findings to the main task force. So no deliberations or actions will be had at the subcommittee level. They're advisory in nature. Bring the content back. The full task force then talks about it, considers it. So all actions are taken at the full task force level. Support staff also supports subcommittees. So we will have at least one support staff member or facilitator involved in all of your subcommittee conversations. So we're there to take notes and support you in that way too. And then when your assignment is complete and you've achieved your objectives as a subcommittee, then your ad hoc subcommittee is done. Section F, I'm showing track changes version online, and this was also emailed to members a couple of days ago. So please let me acknowledge we've got some unfortunate news kind of last minute late in the day. We thought that we had the option to provide task force members with $100 stipend per meeting above reimbursement of expenses. But the actual government code that applies to this task force was not the same one that we were under the impression that it was. So it is a real disappointment. So I'm really sorry about that. And we are tied to statute on this. So I just really wanted to express our disappointment as your support staff. And then the revisions in section F here reflect that change. So it really speaks to members serve on a voluntary basis, and your reimbursements are for travel and per diem expenses at attendance at task force meetings. We can talk about this in a sec. Related to that, if you have not filled out an STD 240 form, we have some hard copies for you. Please be sure we get those before you leave so that we can get you reimbursed for your travel and per diem expenses for today's meeting. And I do believe we need copies of receipts. Section G is authority. Pardon me, I went too far. Task force shall operate in coordination with Strategic Growth Council. Section 3, operational procedures, discusses what does a quorum mean, public comment periods at the end of each agenda item, plus a general comment period at the end. And section C talks about motions. So we'll walk through this. So this is kind of where like a light touch Robert's Rules of Order comes into play, and we can talk through the formalities of the motion and the second and the amendment and all that stuff when we get to taking action. But there's some details here for you all on that. Voting, when we vote, we'll do it by roll call. And then here's a section on meeting logistics. All the Bagley-Keene stuff, so I'm just going to fly through that. If you all decide, you can amend these bylaws at any point. So again, these are just governing principles. That just has to be done by 51% of voting members present at that meeting. Section G talks about inviting guests to participate. So at any time you might want to invite a subject matter expert or an engaged community member or whoever you want to come speak on a particular subtopic, and you're more than welcome to do that. That can be done at the task force meeting or a subcommittee meeting.
Could you cover per diem and travel expense for guests?
Oh, that's a good question. I don't know the answer to that.
We will find out.
We will find out. We will keep a running list. I should have put this earlier. If questions come up that we don't have an immediate answer to, we'll keep a running list. And then we'll either get that back to folks in writing and then post it to the public website and or respond to those questions in the subsequent meeting. So we've got that one captured. Go ahead, James.
If section F3 is accurate, then I think my interpretation of that would be that those types of expenses would be covered. The pursuant to code, except otherwise expressly provided, the task force shall serve without compensation, but shall be allowed necessary expenses incurred in the performance of the duty. Potentially having specialists come in would be part of that performance of the duty of the task force. I don't know, I'm not a lawyer, but
same. And it sounds like a very reasonable explanation to me, but I would prefer to confirm with legal counsel.
I think the only thing which I'm also not a lawyer, but that there's the provisions that provide pertain to task force members, and these are not task force members, so it's a sort of different set of rules under which they could operate, which may then allow for those sorts of things. But I'll certainly, rather than pretending I'm a lawyer, we'll get a comprehensive.
Good question, it's really important.
You can pretend tomorrow, I think we're looking for costing.
So just to clarify that the other section, you had said that things are subject to revision as the task force, but this section F is not subject to revision?
This section F is not very much subject to revision, because there's a specific government code that really governs the distribution of funds.
Yeah, I can talk about that.
Yeah, go for it.
So essentially it's two government code sections. One that pertains to the authority to grant stipends in the first place, and the second which pertains to the amount of those stipends. And when we had initially looked at this, we were looking at the piece that says, in the absence of any language about the stipend amount, that amount is capped at $100. Subsequently, looking into that further, is this government code that's included here that expressly prohibits the provision of stipends in the absence of that language in the enabling statute. So because the statute that created this task force doesn't say members shall get stipends or doesn't say what that amount should be, it defaults back to this. So the only fix for that then is a legislative fix, to have legislation introduced and passed that contains that language. Does that make sense? I'm happy to, again, I'm not the lawyer, we can get Matt to talk more about that, but that was what changed. At first we thought we were just capped at 100. But it turns out we're capped at 0. Which again, to echo things, thought like this was news to us in an extremely recent.
Is there any way we could put in like a motion to change the language of what that payment is? It's not stipend or something else, that we could still, if the money is there to get compensated for our time. Like what does that look like? Is there any way that we could just change that language?
Well, the language comes from the legislation, so you need to change the legislation, and so that's going through that whole process. It's beyond what we're able to do, what you're able to do in this body.
So on the language on there, it says stipends though. Is there any other language related to like payments?
So, again, like that, we've had discussion, our legal team has looked at sort of interpretations of what specific, changing terms, whether that has any change for that, and the way that they're interpreting how that is written, that it would sort of cover any words you could sub in for stipend. So it wouldn't have a change.
I think we made it almost to the bottom. Meeting summaries and agendas, so we talked about that earlier. We'll develop a meeting summary. It will be considered draft until at your following meeting, it's approved with or without modifications by the task force members. And the task force is administered by the Strategic Growth Council. That's our walkthrough. James, Leah.
Yeah, section A, number 6. Where it's talking about the capacity task force members. Just, I think it's just kind of like a typo thing, but within 6 months of their hiring, we change that to appointment since we're not hired.
Great.
Yeah, I was just wondering if for guests and speakers, if we needed to include the language about compensation in the bylaws for it to be able to put into action, or if that's just something that doesn't have to be in this document.
Great question, but that's another one that I'm gonna have to, or think we're gonna have to go get it.
I'll add that alongside the reimbursement question. What would the task force need to do to ensure that that is realized?
I think it's also a good distinction between if we're inviting folks to participate, like community members to participate in just being attendees and to give comment versus someone that we're inviting as a guest speaker, whether there's
Who is agendized.
yeah, and whether or not there's compensation for both or either.
Okay, we'll look into that. Any other area of the bylaws that we want to open up for conversation? Anything that feels like it's missing? James?
Just clarity in that section F, number 3 section around what qualifies as necessary expenses incurred in the performance of duty, because I think that's kind of a little bit to your question, like if there's a task force and they need to like have conference space somewhere in some other part of the state, like I'm assuming that would be covered through this as necessary expenses, but I think just and then like, yeah, what is the difference between inviting somebody to come speak versus covering somebody's expenses to come and speak? Those types of things.
Right. So I'm just gonna draw a distinction between this section being very specific to members of the task force. And then what the first part of the example that you gave in terms of like a meeting facility, this is not applicable to that. So that is something that we would manage and take care of. At no point would we ask a member of the task force to throw down a credit card and hold
Right.
room rental, right?
Yeah.
And then the same, so you opened up an important idea here where we're going to go back and figure out if we were inviting someone, a guest speaker, for example, could we offer them compensation for their time? That would probably not go under section F, reimbursement of expenses, since this is specific to task force members themselves. However, the concept is important, so we need to go get the answer to that and figure out if and where that would be appropriate to put in the bylaws. Is that helpful?
I'd like to expand that too, like if we are going to go visit somewhere that say is an agritourism location, somewhere that they would usually expect a tour to receive some kind of a payment, are we able to provide that?
Great.
So for their time, whatever that time, however that time is spent in some ways.
Okay. Yeah, that's a nice hypothetical scenario. And it would be great to have a meeting location near an agritourism destination. Okay. Other items on, yep, Emily?
Two things, don't believe it's a question, but so it's the task force that are voluntary basis, but the staff is getting paid, correct? Like from SGC and CSU?
Yes.
Okay. And then, second, for what section does it talk about the quorum?
Let's scroll up.
Quorum, If I was sort of, yeah. And my question was just, does that need to be, is that identified enough? As like, because where I come from, we identify a quorum with a number of people, of physical, you know.
Okay, so that's actually something we could probably do at the top of each meeting, because if it's a simple majority of all attending members, say we have 11 out of 12, for example, today, then the majority would be 6. Right? But what if you only had 9, then the majority would be 5 members for that particular meeting. That would constitute a quorum. Or decision-making. But because you're a 12-member body, to obtain a quorum at the start of every meeting, you would need 7 members in order to take action during that particular meeting.
So if we don't establish a quorum, do we still have informational meetings?
Yes, you can.
I thought I seen that in the bylaws too,
Yeah.
right? Yeah.
Yes, or you can decide not to, but you are still allowed to have informational meetings.
Okay. So does the task force folks, are you okay with that definition, or would you want more specific, like number definition as to a quorum? Are you comfortable with what it says here? Is my question for the group.
So just to kind of verify, like, for today, we have 11 here, so we need 6 to be a quorum to make decisions. So
No,
Can I
sorry.
clarify?
Yes.
maybe
The key,
7.
the key language here, a simple majority of all appointed task force members, so not of the group. So this body can be of up to 13. We currently have 12 who've been formally appointed. But we could have, if, 2 of you left, for example, then the appointed number would be down to 10.
Yeah.
And so then you'd need 6 as a majority for that. But it's not of how many could be here today, it's how many are formally appointed at any point.
I get why there's not a like definite number. But yeah, I can see how it's also confusing.
Yeah.
And then the distinction too, right, is with appointed, not present.
Correct.
Right, so a quorum is appointed, not present at the meeting. Yeah, so you could have a number if your total number of appointed was certain, but because there's some amount of flexibility, it gives you a little bit more flexibility in case something were to change. Someone were to drop out, someone were to be added in, it gives you some of that flexibility.
And then you would have to ratify your bylaws or amend your bylaws.
Worse, we're gonna be.
Like, I promise the governance stuff will be the most confusing conversations you have.
But Emily, your question still stands, so I didn't, we didn't need to take that away from.
And I don't know how I feel about the last sentence, the task force may entertain a motion to adjourn, or without a quorum. So how do?
So if, for example, less than a quorum shows up, the only time a quorum, motion can be made is if there's a.
So
quorum
we're
of
required
members.
to come to the meeting, but we have to stay for the full meeting.
Well,
When people don't show up, yeah.
I hope not. Okay, last, do we want to make any changes to this or propose any changes to this?
Not if the group is comfortable with that, the wording.
Okay. Okay, so we're running low on time. Any other comments, final call for comments on the bylaws? And then I propose we also save this, table it to next meeting before we make a motion to adopt.
We're going to, not only it's already been covered before, but what about travel, not to meetings, but to conduct outreach under the duties of the task force?
Great question. Adding it to
I
the
would
list.
imagine that it is related to the duties of the position, but we will ensure that that is. Yeah, we'll get that. Good question.
Yeah, I feel pretty confident in that one, but again.
Yeah, better
I think it's similar to air resources. Okay,
Yeah, real-
Um,
real quick.
yes.
So on the part where it says, subcommittees having, outside experts or non-task force members, do they get compensated for their, or not, do they get reimbursed for their expenses as well?
That's what we're trying to find out.
Oh, okay.
Mhm. But just to clarify, if a task force member is assigned to a subcommittee, then you still receive expense reimbursements.
Okay. If we presented that to like an outside expert, could we?
We have to find out.
Okay, gotcha.
We're gonna take that one back, so we've got a
We'll
short
get
list
that
of.
as soon as possible, and we will make sure to distribute the answer to you, so that if you did have someone in mind and you wanted to start thinking about how to approach this, you can have that answer as soon as possible.
Okay, any objections to holding a decision to adopt the bylaws until next meeting to give folks a little more time just to review? Okay, I'm gonna just take that as general. Yep, heads nodding. Great. Okay, so we will circulate copies of both the charter, the draft charter and the draft bylaws, highlighting the track changes, revisions that we discussed today to you all for further contemplation. We'll pick up this conversation in meeting number 2, and if it feels like the appropriate time, then you all can decide if you're ready to adopt that. And we can, of course, take more revisions on the in-between. With that, let's see, stop my screen share, but let's please move to the election of chair and vice chair. This is the moment everyone's been waiting for, I'm sure. Just to give you a quick recap, if you are interested to serve as the chair and or the vice chair, we're gonna take some self-nominations, or you're welcome to nominate a fellow member of the task force if you feel that they would be a good person for that position. If you're nominated, but you prefer to decline the nomination, you're welcome to do that as well. So the chair and the vice chair will primarily be working with support staff on the in-between to help with agenda development, to consider the work plan, and to liaise with the rest of the task force members on bringing potential agenda items to the table for consideration. Also important is that, but actually, that's all I have to say on that. And then you'll also be calling the meeting to order, and then if we go around and take a vote, be responsible for helping with the roll call and making sure that the vote is captured accurately. I think those are the primary points. Am I missing anything?
No, I think that touches it in. And I guess there's scope for this group to change that too, but we've tried to go for more of a light touch approach with the chair, noting that we have Megan as a facilitator, so some of that more procedural responsibility would rest with Megan as opposed to the chair. But that's just being how we approach what these roles would be, trying to not create a whole bunch of additional work, but still have systems in place that allow us to communicate with you in compliance with Back Virginia as well. So that's sort of why some of those.
Yes, thank you. And there might be a point where you're contacted, the chair or the vice chair is contacted from, say, the press or something like that, or from a different governmental agency or something, and then maybe you'll be required to speak on behalf of the task force with the task force chair. Could be a scenario. So with that, is anyone interested to nominate themselves or the colleague of fellow task force around the table for the role of chair and or vice chair?
I'll nominate myself as the chair.
Great. Any interest in saying a few words? You're not required to, but.
I would be humbled and honored with the opportunity to serve the task force and to assume the role of a servant leader, where I'm gonna take in all the interests of everybody and making sure that our perspectives, our experiences, all the backgrounds and everybody that we represent is included into our agenda items and is represented into all of our work plan and everything that we are moving forward with.
Wonderful. Other nominations for chair?
No.
Need to adopt a round table. I will also throw my name in there for consideration. I also.
For chair or not?
For chair, I mean, for either, but I also be very happy if Bill said that being chair. I feel similarly. I think there's a really unique opportunity here to bring together very specialized considerations regarding land equity in California. And I think it's important to try to marry all of those things, which is challenging. And I think leadership's about service, and I'd be happy to serve the task force in that way. I also think that I have the bandwidth to do the in-between meeting times to support kind of the connection with other task force members as well as SGC staff and yourself, Megan. So, yeah.
Other nominations?
I would like to nominate Councilmember Nate, Lawrence for either vice or chair, whatever you may be comfortable with. As already, a leader in his community, I want to defer to him.
Thank you, I appreciate that. I'm gonna decline. Cool. But I would come back and nominate Emily. Emily for vice chair.
I'll accept.
Others? Before we call the vote for this, we would like to see if there's any public comments related to governance. So charter, bylaws, and or election act. Chair, vice chair. Okay. Nothing in the room. It's for the next item.
Can I make a public comment?
Sorry.
Yes, absolutely.
Oh, and you can come up here. We're not that formal.
Yes.
Yes, we're just trying to collect paperwork.
Hi, I'm Dr. Carrie Waterman. I'm a researcher at UC Davis. And I just, in the bylaws, I wanted some clarification on the research and review. There's like 2 bullets. I feel like they could almost be combined. And I'm just curious about, like the 2.25 that's going, the 2.25 million includes action-oriented research. So I was just curious if there's who will be doing that? Will there be compensation for that? And yeah, kind of the oversight on that. What was your name? Carrie Waterman. And kind of who's going to compile all the information about what's been assessed before, like the Berkeley Food Institute has really great information, and it would be UCA and our staff, or if it's the personnel that are getting paid to be on this task force that would be doing that work. Yeah. And then just the public comment, I'm disappointed to hear that the task force members won't get compensation. When you look at the money of allocation, it'd be nice to know how those are being distributed out, especially if they're doing outreach in their community and getting information. I feel like there should be compensation. Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Waterman. What more public comment?
That's okay. Beth Smoker with the California Food and Farming Network. I'm so excited. This is like a landmark moment. So just my gratitude and appreciation. And also just expressing my deep concern that the task force members aren't getting a stipend. Just hope that maybe there's a commitment to continue working through loopholes or statutes or creative solutions to make sure that their time is really fully compensated. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr.
Peace, I'm Adam X, and I'd like to third those comments and just reflect that this is equity. And what is equity if you don't compensate citizens and people on the front lines for their time, especially those that may not have the ability to take a day off and work at the farm fields. So I do want to point this out. This is a very real concern, and it's we don't want to be part of the problem that this task force aims to address. So, let's keep this in mind when we're having discussion about real equity and what that entails. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hello, my name is Timothy Martin. I'd like to also forth to advocate for some type of compensation for these phenomenal people doing all this great work. And also, I'm not sure if I can, but I would also like to support the nomination of Nelson. We've all, many of us here, seen his work, seen his character, seen his integrity. And he's been a part of many committees and he has an understanding of the nuance of the conversation and definitely with the support of you all. We believe that will be a great thing. And also just want to publicly comment that as people are classified as Black, we have, according to the equity report, the least acreage of farmers and least acreage of farmland. And it is advocate that we have people who are aware of that and address that as well.
Thank you. And we now have two virtual comments as well.
Okay, let's turn to virtual comments. Just as a reminder, these are comments related to governance documents, not general comments. And Lois, when you're ready to let them know when to mute and unmute. Yes. Just as a point of procedure while we're working on the tech on the back end, task force members, at your discretion, you can engage with the public comments, but you are not under an obligation to engage or answer questions or anything like this. And but of course, we welcome you to do so if it makes sense. Your support staff works and takes direction from the task force, so we'll probably hear many times folks have questions or offer suggestions and things like that. Your job is to take all of that and absorb it and reflect back to your support staff what's important and what you want us to dig into. If someone brings up an issue and you say, that's a really good point, please direct us to take action and dig into that. Otherwise, you know, it's just excellent to have engaged public members in here on things that are of importance to them. Lois.
Thanks. For virtual public comment, I will request you to unmute and you'll have the opportunity to speak. First, Melody, I am asking you to unmute and if you can speak now.
Hi, can everybody hear me?
Sound great.
Hello?
Go ahead, Melody. Yes, sorry, we can hear you.
Okay, great. Thank you. Hi, I'm Melody. I'm a researcher from UCLA focused on land access and land health from in community food systems. I just calling in to say that I'm pleased that this task force exists to begin with, to begin tackling the issue of land equity, which as a member of the task force has already said is 200 years too late, but better late than never. But I do think I want to comment again on the issue of stipends. I do think that the people serving on this task force are doing crucial labor and that labor must be compensated. As a member of the public, if members of the task force are not being compensated, it's actually not clear to me where the funding for the land equity task force is going, or in fact, what the equity implications of that are. If work on this has not already been initiated, the law preventing stipends from being issued for this work needs to be rescinded or amended. It seems pretty unfair that the people who are contributing their time to serve on this task force to support equity issues in land and food systems are themselves not being equitably treated. Thank you.
Thank you, Melody, for your comment.
Next is Victoria.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, hi, Victoria.
Hi, thank you. I'm so excited for the work that this task force will do in the coming years. And I just wanted to hop on and show my support for the nomination of Nelson as chair. Thank you.
Thank you. Other members of the public online? No. Okay. After hearing public comment, would any task force member like to re-engage in deliberations related to nomination of chair, vice chair? Okay, well, we have Nelson for chair, James for chair. Both gentlemen indicated that they would also take the role of vice chair, but I think currently you're both looking for a chair position, unless you would like an amendment. And then Emily has been nominated for vice chair. Okay, so we're going to go around the room and do a roll call vote, and if you could just share with us who you would like as chair to serve as chair or vice chair, and then we will see if a majority rises to the surface, and then those persons will assume the role of chair and vice chair. May I start with you?
Sure.
Okay.
I'd like to,
Oh, sorry. Do I need to say member Dorian Payan?
I will. Oh, do you have to say that?
I don't know, do I? Or maybe you could. We're learning. Go ahead, Dorian.
sure, I vote for Nelson for chair and Emily for vice chair. Are we doing chair? Emily?
We can do both.
Emily for vice chair.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Via Rittenhouse, I'll second Nelson for chair and Emily for vice chair.
Okay, Nelson, I don't feel voting for myself, so I'll vote for James for chair and Emily for vice chair.
I hate this, I don't want to choose. But I'm gonna vote for Nelson for chair and Emily for vice chair.
Lawrence Harlan, and I vote Nelson for chair and Emily for vice chair.
Thank you.
Nathaniel Brown, I vote James for chair and Emily for vice chair.
Feel awkward, but I'm gonna vote for myself for chair and Nelson for vice chair. I feel like I should do what you did.
I still feel like anybody would do great. It's hard. I will go ahead and vote, James for chair and Emily for vice chair.
Leah.
I know, I was just trying. Can we do can there be a treasurer or something? Everybody who wants to serve should be able to serve. I think I'll do Nelson for chair and James for vice chair.
Mixing it up.
All right, so I'll vote for Nelson for chair and Emily for vice chair. Emily.
Oh, I will vote for Nelson and myself. What was your? Irene.
Yeah, Irene. Okay. So we have a total. 4 chair, congratulations, Nelson. Thank you very much for your willingness to step up. We know you would have also served well in this capacity. Okay, we have just 20 minutes remaining. Please forgive me. We are going to do a fly through of this work plan and timeline, a fly through of briefing materials. And do we have how many members of the public interested for general comments?
So far, just one.
Okay, so we do have a general public comment period coming up. If any member of the public online or in the room is interested, we're going to turn to that as our last agenda item. So please take a second to fill out your comment card. All right, work plan and timeline. So this is just a quick snapshot to let you know what are we looking at. We were estimating quarterly meetings. And so that's just 10 meetings, including today's meeting, to get you all to the finish line of a report due January 1st, 2026. Plus, we can sprinkle in some ad hoc subcommittee meetings along the way. So if we stick to this rhythm, our next meeting would be late January, early February 2024. maybe we start to have conversations around California's land equity landscape at that first meeting, and then, possibly wrap up charter and bylaws. So then we'll work with your newly elected chair and vice chair to start thinking about that agenda and then arc of conversations to get us to, the finish line there. Just also want to say, we ballparked 3 hours or so because we haven't yet worked together and we don't yet have a sense of the magnitude of the work and the depth of conversations you would like to have. We are not bound to any particular timeline. It's at the discretion of you all as a collective task force. So if you would like a full day meeting and your conversations were in the full day meeting, great. If you want 2 days, we can also make that happen. So we've got flexibility and those are conversations we'll have along the way. Sound good? James?
If we were to, I'm curious, like how, I think we need more time. I think we either need longer periods of time or more meetings or both. And I'm just, would that be like a formal proposal that would, I don't know, would I
think
motion for that or something?
No, I don't think that would require a motion. I think it's just kind of a general comment. And then you could even follow up with a message to your chair and vice chair that suggests we extend the next meeting time. As a good standard practice, it's good to build an agenda and then look at the amount of time you need. So this was a little bit interesting because it was our first meeting and honestly, schedules were really tough to navigate. So this was our kind of best slot. But I think we have enough time 3 months from now where we'll be able to see what we want to talk about and then expand or contract the time.
I think if you wanted to hear everyone's thoughts on that particular issue, you would propose that to the chair and vice chair for inclusion on the agenda as a discussion item at the meeting.
Oh, if you want to make it like a thing, okay.
Well, if you want to hear what
Yeah,
everyone is, and that's back this bag with King challenge too, because you can't shop around.
Yeah.
Even,
Okay. Joya.
Maybe as an additional comment, kind of building off of that, is maybe in the next meeting, the land equity landscape, yes, and trying to finish these governance documents, but maybe there's a period of time where we can talk about what's the content that we want to discuss.
Yeah.
So we can get kind of a map of what that looks like, so we know if we're gonna need more time and for what topics, and maybe even how we go at topics, because maybe what we need to talk about can't only be happen here.
Right.
So we could have a time on the next agenda, a good amount of time to lay that out.
Excellent. Flying through. Someone stop me if you want to. Briefing materials. Camille.
I will be so quick. Well, first of all, thank you all for looking at this large packet of briefing materials that you were provided. These were not at all meant to be fully comprehensive, as you all have said and acknowledged. There's just so much to talk about in this issue. So this was more a way to respond to the information you had passed along to Megan that you thought might be helpful. So for some task force members, a refresher of how the legislative process works, just sort of a shared ground that then we can go and build as those different priority areas, topics are to be considered. So we have already received some specific research requests. So to tell you how this process works, the ideal way would be for you to, if you have something that you would like researched or you have a topic that you'd like to consider, you go through the chair and vice chair as adding that as an agendized item, right? So that would be brought up in a meeting. And then the research team prepares materials that will serve the conversation around that agendized item. Those requests or those suggestions can come into the chair and vice chair at any time, and the chair and vice chair can pass along those requests to the research team. If you have sort of a specific research request related to that agenda item, that topic, you can pass this along anytime. And this is for both subcommittees and full task force meetings. We can produce research for you. And what we would do is in advance of that meeting, we will produce a packet that basically collects whatever had come to us. Like I'd really like to see, we have a request out, right, to see about tribal water rights in particular, right? So something like that, if that were an agendized item, that information would be collected and shared with the meeting. So that's a bit of how that process would work. And again, the reason why we have a research team is because this is such a big topic with very big implications. And it would be a lot to ask all of you to come to the table without producing some kind of shared document or information that you can draw on and then recommend other sorts of digging to be done. So that's my very brief spiel about why we have briefing packets and what the research team is meant to do. Yes, Ruth.
Just a quick question. So what kind of research can the research team do? Is it more kind of drawing on publicly available data? Can you, like, how much extra research can you do on your own?
That's a very good question. So I am a researcher by training, a PhD, coming from faculty position. So I actually have some extensive research shops, but I think your question is more like, what could we ask the research team to go out and visit, like, and come back? Yeah.
Right. Like how much can we ask it?
Yeah, like what is the actual, right, not like, can you do the research?
Yeah, your qualifications. But
It's a good question though. Let's like look into that and see like do you have a response to that, Sean, as an immediate response?
Yeah, well, I guess I would say that I think what we're primarily talking about here is just basic desk research. If you had sort of, short-term requests in order to frame the discussion, or sort of, short lit reviews, things like that, you're pulling stats on various, that is, something that we can deliver short turnaround. But that is not to be confused with the action-oriented research that I think was mentioned by a member of the public previously,
Yes.
of which there is also funding available, which we are in the process of determining how best to administer that in terms of grants to whom and where and what conditions and what those research topics may be. So there's that side of things too. But I think what Camille is talking to here is more of this, as I said, fairly basic level desk research. But
Digging through existing scholarship, digging through government reports, which was how this first packet was compiled, was by digging through available information. It's a good question.
And the other funding that's for additional action research, are we gonna be involved in that as well, like determining anything around that, or is that outside of our role?
no, that will be sort of informed by task force discussions. Task force wouldn't have decision-making authority over like who would be funded, for example, but would play the advisory role that you're playing in the development of these recommendations. If this body is saying we need to know more about X, we want to see where this is happening, then that we certainly even, but it's intended as a dialogue.
Okay, thank you.
Will we have an opportunity to meet the research team? Or, I mean, is it just people in the room, or is there, I guess that's one of my questions.
No, it's a very good question. As of now, the people who are sort of putting this time and doing this research, it's me, and then we're anticipating another support staff position.
Okay.
Yes, but if there are particular connections that could be made, some of you are yourselves researchers or you have connections. You can imagine, you can actually make those connections between, people hired to do this research and people who are doing the work, and that could be a collaborative space, like to learn from what they're doing.
Yeah, I guess just to build on, like, acknowledging the wealth of knowledge and expertise in this room, and it doesn't reside with us at this end of the table. I would say that's, so if you have particular areas of things like, here's all this stuff, like, please, you can deliver that to us and then share it with the group, but just trying to also then deliver that in the formal meeting structure as well. That would then be framed around a discussion or a particular action item.
And if we continue in the briefing packets, you have suggestions for them, or let's say one comes around to you and you say, hey, you're missing something really, like, there's that that is actually something that should be recognized, known, and then contributed to, right? So again, these are not meant to be final documents that are the final word, but rather a foundation, and then you all actually should and will contribute your own kind of knowledge, as Sean said. So much more to say, but not time to say. Well, we were planning to talk more about it in the next meeting as
well. Any public comments on this agenda item, comprising of work plans, scheduling, and briefing materials?
Not on this item.
Okay. Any last comments from task force members on this agenda item?
Just for the next meeting, are you gonna schedule that via email, or are we doing that today?
We cannot do that today. We would be here for 3 hours.
Yeah.
An additional 3 hours. We, I think, first want to explore date options with the chair and the vice chair, and then probably do a follow-up doodle poll in the next week, if that works for everyone. And then I can reach out to folks individually just to confirm schedules. But it would be nice to get a hold going on. Okay. General public comments, already we moved to general public comment? Okay, so at this time during the general public comments, space, public can comment on anything that is generally under the jurisdiction of the task force. It doesn't have to be related to an agenda item, but it cannot be obscure, like, ideas for the next attraction at Disneyland, right? It's gotta be related to task force business. And, we try to please keep our comments to 2 minutes. Everyone's been really great about respecting time, so thank you. Lois, when you're ready. Yeah.
We have 2 in-person comments. First is Adam X, then is Junie, F.
Right.
Yes, please come up to the front of the room for public comment so that the owl can catch and record you.
My name is Brother Adam X. I'm a land justice advocate from Los Angeles and a current director of finance for Community Alliance Family Farmers. And task force members have spoken upon this earlier, but when you're talking about land equity, we're really talking about healing. So this is a historical moment, and one is also reflect upon that and what this means to the descendants of slavery in this country, and also to the indigenous inhabitants of this country who were the victims of slaughter because of land. So this is an historical moment, and I want to specifically call out points in the briefing, just because they are very specific. White producers operate over 94% of farms and own over 97% of farmland. Black or African American producers operate 0.9% of farms and own 0.5% of farmland. So my question is, how do we go from being the primary agriculturalists and farmers of this country to the least owningest land people in this country? And didn't happen by mistake. And I implore the task force to address these issues and provide remedies for reconciliation, justice, and atonement. I want to comment on the fact that the reparations task force just ended, and the majority of their recommendations were policy-based or compensation-based, but not one of the reparations task force recommendations addressed the land issue. So if we're really talking about repair, justice, and healing, that conversation needs to happen. And I view this as not just the first place in the state to have this conversation, in the nation, and potentially the world, to actually have that healing conversation. So I am really appreciative and proud to be a part of this moment, and I look forward to participating in future meetings. Last comment is in regard to the follow-up of this. So we don't want all this labor to go to waste, but thinking about the unemployment task force, I think of culturally relevant means of outreach for these communities during the task force meetings and also after the fact, so that people understand the magnitude of this moment. And yeah, just generally supporting financially and technical assistance agricultural projects in present time that serve the task force objectives. So viewing projects that are currently doing the work right now, supporting them, and investing at the state level for agricultural infrastructure. So that's financial products, grants, loans for underserved farmers and agriculturalists, potentially trade schools, agricultural A&Ms in the state of California. So just wanted to say that. Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah.
Y'all, am I in the right spot? With great cameras on me? Hi folks, yeah, my name is Jamie Fanous. I use she, her pronouns. I am the policy director at the Community Alliance for Family Farmers, CAF. Yeah, I just want to acknowledge, like, this product is 2 years in the making, and has been a CAF advocacy effort for a very long time. And so it's actually a really big deal to see this even exist with its flaws, being, of course, the stipends that we've talked about, and just naming, like, as task force members, like, push this staff in any way, shape, or form. Just naming, I know many of you might not have never been on like a government body before, And it is your job to like feel empowered, and really push government staff that are operating this in any way, shape, or form, to really direct it, because it is your space. I mean, I feel like today's meeting has been a lot of like throwing information at you and a lot of that, but just acknowledging like, we want every single one of you to feel very empowered in using your voice and directing this space, because it is meant to be yours. So wanting to like lay that foundation in my comments, because it was really important to Kath, it's really important to me that each one of you kind of feels ownership of the direction of wherever this goes. So just naming that, and yeah, we will, as an advocate, I will continue to work on the stipend issue, because it has been one that we've been in debates and negotiations for a long time on, and it is honestly a statewide issue. It's not just this body, and so acknowledging that it's serious, and many of the comments that have already been made address that, and particularly when equity is in the title of this task force, it's extremely inappropriate that you are not being compensated for your time. So just acknowledging that, but I really appreciate you all, and are grateful for you all, and you are the smartest, most capable, most equipped people to be directing this, and so I'm really eager to see what comes out of this body. So thank you.
Thank you, Jamie.
I don't have cards for any other public comments.
Okay. That concludes then our general public comment period. And the action items we came out with today are, we've got about 4 or 5 follow-up questions from you all that we'll put in written form and seek to get responses to as soon as we can. And then scheduling, working with your chair and the vice chair to schedule your next meeting. So putting together options and then getting a doodle poll out to you all. And we will be generating meeting notes. And those draft meeting notes will be available in a couple of weeks. And then all of the materials, again, are posted to the project website, which we just popped up here. SGC stands for Strategic Growth Council, of course, .ca.gov/meetings, and your acronym, CALETF. We are right on time. Amazing. Newly elected chair and vice chair, closing remarks from you all at all?
I just want to appreciate everybody who showed up in person, everybody that's on the Zoom. And I second all of the comments about really pushing the issue on what is equity, what is justice, right? Those are 2 different things. And this room, we're talking about equity. And if we're talking about justice, and we're really talking about land back, we're talking about justice, we're really talking about land reparations, right? And so really pushing that issue and really defining what that is. I'm looking forward to exploring that together with our group here. I agree, we have a very capable group, of course, but also I'm very humbled to be in the presence of so many like great minds, so many great leaders in the movement in California. Looking forward to shaping policy moving forward.
Yeah, just thankful for the nomination and your guys' votes and your trust as the vice chair, and want to call meeting adjourned. I got a plane to catch.
Have a great rest of the evening. Safe trick reading tomorrow. I think costumes are excellent.
The form here for reimbursement, I have it out here if you'd like to have a copy.